I'm Ed Amoroso from Tag Cyber, and I'm here with my friend Larry Hurtado, who is the CEO of Digital Defense. Welcome, Larry.
Thank you so much.
Welcome to New York.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Nice to see you.
It's a nice change in weather from Texas. So.
Oh, I bet it is. It usually is. That's great. Great. Now, vulnerability management is one of the things you guys are awesome at. Your team spends a lot of time on that. A lot of people watching might not know exactly what that is. Mm-hmm. What do you tell customers when they say, hey, Larry, what's vulnerability management?
Well, for me, I always start out by basically sharing the old adage from Benjamin Franklin that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. It's actually referenced within several standards documents. Vulnerability management is the ounce of prevention, and the pound of cure is things like incident response. So to me, vulnerability management is a cyclical process. It's the cyclical practice of identifying, classifying, remediating and mitigating vulnerabilities. So the objective is to obviously identify where vulnerabilities are within a network, and then basically finding ways to eliminate those vulnerabilities as fast as possible to reduce security risk.
A lot of people would think patching immediately. Is that a big piece of it?
Absolutely.
Patching your systems?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have to be able to identify those platforms that are in need of patches, and then basically work with the IT operations team to basically help them understand how to go about the patch, and then basically apply them quickly.
Yeah. Do 0 days present a particular problem? Like we all think of, even the name means, whoa, this brand new thing, what do I do, what do I do? How do a lot of your customers deal with and try and mitigate the effects of these brand new vulnerabilities that pop up? What do you do with zero?
There is definitely a tendency in the industry to react quickly to 0 days. However, I think if you actually looked at the statistics, you'll find that it's the well-known vulnerabilities that have been out there for a long time that are the gotchas. And a part of a vulnerability management program is to make sure you know where those well-known vulnerabilities are, and then basically, once again, figure out ways to remediate them as best as possible to reduce that risk.
One of the things I've seen you discuss frequently is this idea that infrastructure changes over time. Like if you and I are a couple of data center guys, we're constantly changing servers and systems and software. That's a pretty big issue in vulnerability management.
It's huge.
How do you deal with that?
So as you and I have talked, Ed, we present our solution in conferences all the time now. And one of the things that we always find is that people come up to us with aha moments. We've communicated this challenge of change almost since the beginning of when we first started business. And what happens is that security technologies need to find ways to lock in on hosts within a network. It's basically the way in which they keep track of the status of those devices. And the problem is that the parameters that they use to lock in on those devices changes over time. In fact, we actually performed a study, and we were actually even surprised at how much that change actually occurs. But when you look at MAC addresses and DNS host names and IP addresses, those are the parameters that security technologies look to keep track of the device, but they have not accounted for that change. And that change just happens, as you stated, just from general people, IT operations folks managing the network. Those parameters change over time. And if you're not keeping track of it, unfortunately, it's resulting in a lot of false positives, a lot of false negatives. If you're looking at it from a vulnerability management standpoint, you're giving incorrect guidance in terms of how to drive your remediation programs. If your vulnerability management system is integrated into your security ecosystem, then you're giving bad advice to the other devices within your overall network.
So you need a platform for this, right? Does anybody still do kind of vulnerability management manually with Excel spreadsheets?
For us, what we observe when we onboard new clients, many of the clients that we onboard, unfortunately, have had some of the state-of-the-art tools out there, and unfortunately, because those state-of-the-art tools aren't accounting for this change, they've actually had to employ people to export results out of vulnerability management into Excel spreadsheets to take into account this issue so that they can actually make sense of the data. For us, we've actually built in something that we call scan-to-scan host correlation that automatically keeps track of this over time, and it's a function of our patented advanced fingerprinting capability that allows for us to do that. So,
pretty
in
cool.
answer to your question, there's still a lot of manual things being done. It really probably depends. Probably when you go smaller in organizational size, the manual component goes up. But there's still a lot of manual out there.
Is platform usage, is that a way of improving the accuracy of your results? Like, I know that's something you spend a lot of time on, making sure there's this focus on accuracy. Help me with that. What are the things that a typical VM manager needs to be focused on with respect to the accuracy of reporting?
You know, I've been surprised at the number of times in this past year when I've been to conferences where individuals have stood up and talked about how, specifically as it relates to vulnerability management, one of the criteria that they had historically is basically selecting platforms based upon the volume of things that they detect and identify. But it's been interesting to me because there's been a shift to not only address to make sure that there's appropriate coverage, but to improve the accuracy. And once again, if I'm running a vulnerability management program, I want to make sure that that program basically accounts for this device movement that we've been discussing. Because if you don't account for that device movement, then you're going to be basically making decisions based upon erroneous results. Host duplications, false positives, false negatives. So.
You spent some time thinking about maturity models, haven't you, with the team? This idea that based on certain criteria, you may be pretty good at this, or maybe still learning. Tell me a little bit about that. Where the idea of coming up with maturity models for VM, where did that come from?
The guy that heads up our operations is a gentleman by the name of Mark Bell. And Mark has always been focusing on being able to measure and also being able to reward organizations that do vulnerability management well. So from the early days, we've actually leveraged a scoring mechanism that we have built into our platform called Security Grade Point Average. Just like from university days, it's a 4.0 type scale. And we purposefully call it Security GPA so that C-levels can really understand and appreciate what the status of their
Make sure you're not getting a 1.0, right?
Exactly. So every year, we actually go out and we measure the efficacy of our clients' security programs. We'll actually rank them based upon small, medium, or large networks, and we'll actually recognize those organizations that perform the best. I will actually go out and present a trophy to their boards, et cetera. And for security practitioners, usually the only time they're recognized when there's bad news, right? And so we're actually going out with good news. But we've taken that one step further. We actually have developed this maturity model to basically help organizations understand that, based upon the way in which you've architected your program today and the things that you have in place, this is the type of maturity that you're currently at. And more importantly, if you did these other things, you could go up that maturity model curve, if you will, and become better at it and reduce security risk more effectively.
Yeah, you think the bigger companies have an advantage, like having more people, or is it a disadvantage having more complex infrastructure? Or is there really no correlation?
From my observation, the larger the company, the more complicated it is, and therefore it's sort of by definition understanding as to why they have more resources, as to whether or not they're performing more effectively or not. I will share with you, when we, as an organization that also performs penetration tests, when we work with larger organizations, unfortunately, it's higher the likelihood that we're going to be able to penetrate those organizations faster because of the complexity of the infrastructure. So, a smaller company probably has the advantage because their networks aren't that complex. It's probably more manageable. So even though they don't necessarily have the same amount of resource, it's going to be easier for them to lock it down. Now, I will put a caveat on that, is smaller organizations still are handicapped by the assumption that because they're small, they're not going to be targeted by the attacker. And as you know, Ed, the way in which attacks are carried out these days in an automated fashion, that's not true. And so it's unfortunately, I don't know how well it correlates in terms of size and whether or not it's a situation where they perform better or worse based upon the resources that they have.
Well, one big trend that I think is being led by the smaller companies is this push to virtualization, the idea of using as a service, using cloud, using sometimes all third-party services. You think that makes it harder to do VM, or do you think possibly easier?
You know, we recently had an article released where, unfortunately, the move towards virtualization has many positive benefits, and we're big believers in
Cost
that.
saving.
Exactly. But unfortunately, it also allows for the bad guys to be more creative and more quick in terms of developing new attack vectors.
True.
So you have to, you know, there's a blessing and a curse,
The
if you will.
offense and defense both
Exactly.
take advantage of it, but we will see. Hey, where's all this going? Where do you think vulnerability management will be in 2, 3, 4, 5 years?
What I can share with you right now is that certainly from our client's perspective, the move towards automation is at a breakneck pace. I mean, my assumption is that because there's a limited amount of resources out there from which to hire people, it's pretty well documented about how far behind we are in terms of training up folks for cybersecurity. We've got a lot of initiatives going on in San Antonio alone to basically increase the speed of getting kids to go through school and learn more about information assurance. But certainly from my perspective, that move towards automation is definitely going to occupy us for at least the next several years. It's something that we're very focused in terms of our own business to basically integrate with more partners, and we obviously try to be partner friendly. We try to stay in our swim lane per se to make sure that we're focusing in on scanning and basically continuing to invest in scanning and do it best. So,
You enjoying running the company?
absolutely.
It's a lot of work, huh?
A lot of work, but it's interesting times, and you know, I consider myself a patriot, and so for me to be able to help the country in our sort of my own way, it's something that makes it easy for me to get up in the morning and go to work. So,
How many years you been at this?
in 2002 is when I started with Digital Defense. So we're long-standing company, and it's been a great ride.
Well, keep doing the good work you're doing. We do appreciate it. We all benefit from it.
Super.
I hope you keep at it.
Thanks a lot, Ed.
Thanks for coming by to see us.
Appreciate it.
We'll see you next time. Thanks for checking out our video. Make sure you subscribe for more of our cybersecurity content, and also make sure you visit our website. Have a great day.